Okay, so you want to own an EV charging network. Plant a row of chargers near a busy highway, and wait for the electric cars to roll in. You own the one thing an electric car cannot leave without. It's a toll booth for the electric age. No staff, no inventory. You sit back and let the money roll in. Sounds simple. It really is not. Because here's the strange part. The country is building chargers by the tens of thousands. The government is pouring billions into them. Every automaker on Earth is betting its entire future on them. And the companies that run the biggest networks lose money every single year. The more chargers we build, the more money they bleed. And you can't write it off by saying, the traffic hasn't arrived yet, because the traffic is here. There are more electric cars on American roads than ever before. There are more charging sessions than ever before. The stations are busier than they have ever been. And they still don't pay for themselves. So, either this is the most exciting industry in the world, that somehow can't turn a profit, or everything we think a charging station is wrong. And the story of how these networks actually make money, and why so many of them don't, is one of the strangest in all of energy. So let's build the station you just pictured, and watch what happens to it. Because by the time we're done, you'll understand exactly which kind of station you'd be buying, and why. Here's what you're really selling. Electricity. You buy it from the grid by the kilowatt hour, and you sell it back to a driver at around 45 cents at a fast charger. Your own wholesale cost for that electricity is a fraction of that number. So on paper, the markup is enormous. Buy low, sell high, collect from a captive audience. The oldest business in the world, and it's exactly where the fantasy starts to die. Because here's the first thing nobody tells you when they picture owning a charging station. That markup is real, and it's not the problem. The problem is everything wrapped around it. A gas station gets to sell you the gas, and then sell you a coffee, and then sell you a lottery ticket, all from the same square of land, all day long. The gas is what gets you in the door. But a charging station is a one-product business with a captive customer who's there for 20 minutes, not 20 seconds, and buys exactly one thing. The whole station is built around a single transaction, and the cost of delivering that one transaction is not the electricity, it's everything wrapped around the electricity. So where does the money actually go? Let's start with the first bill that lands on your desk, because it's not a bill for the power you sold. It's a bill for the power you might have used. And this bill is going to come back in this story, so keep it in the back of your mind. When a business plugs into the grid, the utility doesn't bill it the way it bills your house, for the energy you actually used. It bills for something else on top of the energy, the highest amount of power the business draws at any single moment, usually measured over a 15-minute peak. They call it the demand charge. And here's what that means for the station you just built. Picture the first car that pulls into your lot. The driver plugs into a fast charger, and for the next 30 minutes that machine drinks power at its absolute maximum. One full power session can set the peak for your entire billing month. The utility looks at that 15-minute spike and says, we built the grid to serve that, so you pay for it. Whether the next car shows up in 5 minutes, 5 hours, or 5 days, that one spike owns your bill. And when that bill lands, you'll stare at the one line that's bigger than everything else, the line for power you never actually sold. That's the moment most new owners figure out they're not in the electricity business at all. That's the trap underneath this entire industry. Your electricity bill is mostly not a bill for electricity. It's a bill for the promise of electricity, priced off your busiest 15 minutes. And here's what makes it so dangerous. The obvious fix, sell more power and charge more for it, doesn't fix the bill. It makes it worse. Charging more per session raises the peak, which raises the demand charge, which eats the margin you just made. The harder you run the machine, the more the bill punishes you. And when the machine sits idle, the demand charge doesn't go away, because the peak already happened, and the bill already got set. So you're paying full price for a machine that might sell nothing for hours. And that's before we even talk about the machine itself. A single modern fast charger, installed and connected, can run anywhere from $30,000 to nearly $300,000. That's the hardware, plus the transformer, plus the grid connection you waited months to get, plus the permits, plus the concrete pad, plus the land it sits on. And that's for one stall. A serious site runs a row of them. Before a single car ever plugs in, you can spend more than a small house costs on a machine that looks like a vending machine. And that grid connection deserves a moment of its own, because it's the part nobody budgets for. You can't just plug a fast charger into the nearest pole. The grid has to be told you exist. The local utility has to study your site, figure out whether the transformer down the street can handle the load, and in a lot of places that means months on a wait list, sometimes over a year, just for the engineering study. And if the transformer is too small, you're paying to upgrade it, tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes six figures, before a single car can plug in. The machine itself is expensive. The permission to feed it is a whole other line item. This is the second thing nobody tells you when they picture owning a charging network. You're not buying chargers, you're buying a small power plant, and a power plant has a very specific problem. It only earns money when a car is actually plugged into it. A power plant that sits idle is not a business. It's a liability with a bill, and it doesn't stop at the install. The machines break, they get vandalized, they need software updates, and when a unit goes down, which happens more often than the industry likes to admit, it's not just a broken machine. It's a dead asset that's still paying rent, still paying the demand charge, still paying for the grid connection, and producing nothing. Studies keep finding that a meaningful share of public chargers are out of service at any given moment. Customer satisfaction surveys for the industry keep coming back with the same complaint. The charger was down. The charger was slow. The charger lied about working. Here's what that looks like from your side of the lot. A driver pulls in, sees the yellow tape across the machine, and drives on. He doesn't know your name. He doesn't care about your margins. He just learns that your lot is unreliable. Next time, he doesn't even slow down. A dead charger doesn't just lose its own money. It takes money away from the working chargers next to it. And that yellow tape, like the bill on your desk, is going to come back before this story is over. So now you've got the full cost stack. The demand charge that punishes your busiest minutes, the six-figure machines, the transformer upgrade, the maintenance, the rent, the grid connection. All of it arriving every month, whether a single car shows up or not. Which brings us to the number that decides whether the station you just built ever works. Here's where it gets interesting, because the entire business comes down to one number, and almost nobody outside the industry knows it: utilization. The share of a day that a charger is actually doing the thing it was built to do. In the United States, the average public fast charger sits idle the overwhelming majority of its life. In 2022, national utilization ran around 7.5%. The best single month on record barely cleared 12%. Do you know what the industry says a station needs just to break even? Somewhere between 15 and 20%. Now here's the part that should really bother you. Even a station that hits 15% utilization, call it 7 30-minute sessions a day, which looks like a genuinely busy charger, even that station loses money. When the big consulting firms modeled a typical fast charging station, they found that at 15% utilization, the station brings in roughly $270,000 a year in revenue, spends roughly $240,000 a year just keeping the lights on, and then eats another $90,000 a year as the machines wear out. Add it up, and that station loses somewhere around $50,000 a year. Busy and losing money. Read that number again. A charger that is plugged in 7 times a day, every day, all year, loses money. The markup we started with, that fat 45-cent price, is not enough, because the cost of the machine, and the grid, and the demand charge, is spread across so few hours of actual selling. The machine is a 24-hour cost. The revenue only shows up when a car is there. And in most of the country, the cars aren't there enough. And it's not a theory. Researchers actually went and checked the real thing. They studied roughly 1,300 fast chargers across California. Over 5 million charging sessions, one of the largest studies of its kind. And here's what they found. At the rates those chargers were actually used, the stations could not reach a 3-year payback, not even close. The researchers doubled the sessions at every station. They doubled the energy every car bought, and it still wasn't enough. The only way the math worked was with government subsidies, which pulled the payback down to 2 or 3 years. In other words, the busiest, most developed charging market in the country couldn't make its own stations pay for themselves. The machines only worked once somebody else wrote a check. Remember that bill on your desk? In California, the most charging-happy state in the country, the numbers on that bill were still bigger than anything the machines could sell. Now here's the comparison that makes this land. The gas station on the same highway doesn't survive on gas. About a third of its revenue comes from the store inside, the coffee, the snacks, the lottery tickets. Roughly half of its fuel customers buy something else while they're there. That second product is what carries the building. A charging station has no second product. It has a captive customer for 20 minutes and nothing to sell them. The industry has calculated that adding just a few $1,000s a year of extra sales per station, a shop, a coffee stand, an advertising screen, could be the difference between a station that loses money and one that breaks even. Nobody has reliably cracked it yet. That's how thin the margin is. The entire business is riding on a cup of coffee. And here's the counterintuitive detail hiding inside that math. Somewhere in the gap between 7.5% and 20%, the station you just built flips from a money pit into a money machine. But almost nobody is anywhere near the flip, which means the whole industry, from the outside, looks busy, and from the inside, is bleeding. Which raises the obvious question: if the stations are this empty, where are all the electric cars charging instead? And that's the structural problem underneath all of it. Roughly 80% of electric vehicle charging happens at home. People plug in where the car sleeps. The public fast charger is not the everyday fuel stop. It's the road trip charger. It's the charger for people who live in apartments and can't install a wall box. That's a real market. And it's growing. But it's a subset of the market, not the market itself. The toll booth you imagined, the one every electric car has to pass through, simply doesn't exist. Because most electric cars almost never come near a public charger at all. Picture the actual customer. A family on a road trip pulls off the interstate, plugs in for 25 minutes, and that's the fast charger's whole day, a handful of those moments. Meanwhile, the office worker who drives electric plugs in at home every night and never thinks about a public charger again. The network is built for the rare moments and charged for the rare moments, but priced as if the rare moments happened every day. Now add the chicken and the egg, and this is where the whole industry's logic starts to bend. Drivers don't buy electric cars unless they trust the charging network. Charging companies don't build stations unless they can see the drivers. So you have an industry waiting on itself. The stations need traffic to justify the build, and the cars need stations to justify the purchase. Somebody has to break that loop, and the people who tried to break it did it with money that didn't come from the stations themselves. Here's the honest way to say it. The public charging network is not being built because the stations work. It's being built because somebody else is paying for them to exist before they work. And that leads to the strangest part of this story. Where the boom's money actually came from. The biggest early build-out of fast charging in America was not built by a business that expected to make money. It was built with a court settlement. When Volkswagen got caught cheating on diesel emissions tests, the company was ordered to spend billions making up for it, and part of that money went to building a nationwide charging network. That's where Electrify America came from. Roughly $2 billion of punishment money spent over 10 years, with no requirement that the stations ever turn a profit. The network was built to satisfy a court order, not a return on capital test. Nobody in that deal was asking whether the stations would ever pay for themselves, because the point was never for them to pay for themselves. Then the federal government got involved. The infrastructure law committed billions to charging, with the bulk of it going to build fast charging stations along major highways, roughly every 50 miles, each with 4 high-power ports. And here's the detail hiding inside that program. Stations were placed to satisfy coverage rules every 50 miles along designated corridors, not to match where drivers actually show up. A station could be built because the map said there was a gap, even if the drivers in that stretch had never asked for one. The second wave of the boom was also paid for before the business existed, by taxpayers, in locations chosen by a map, not by traffic. And some of those stations, the ones sitting at the empty exit ramps, are exactly where that yellow tape shows up, not because the equipment is worse, but because nobody is coming to use it, so nobody is coming to fix it. Keep that in mind, because it changes the whole story. The charging boom you keep hearing about was not a market that worked, it was a bet that somebody else paid for. The stations were built on court money and tax money, ahead of the demand, in the hope that the cars would arrive before the bills did. And in most of the country the cars haven't arrived fast enough. So now the obvious question. Is there any model anywhere that actually works? Yes? One. And the way it works tells you everything about why everyone else struggles. Tesla built the biggest fast charging network in the country, and it's the closest thing the industry has to a business that functions. But here's the part that matters. Tesla's own chief executive has described the gross margins on charging as thin, around 10%. The Supercharger network exists, first and foremost, to sell cars. It's a feature, not a profit center. Tesla doesn't need the station to pay for itself as a standalone business, because the station's real job is to make the car worth buying. The car sale is where the money is made. The charger is the reason the sale happens, and Tesla stacks the deck in ways a standalone operator can't. It builds its own hardware, which cuts the install cost. It owns the cars, so it knows exactly where they go and when. It prices by the minute in many places, which means the busiest stations actually earn more than a flat per kilowatt price would give them. And it charges idle fees when a car sits plugged in after it's done, so nobody treats a station as free parking. If you finish charging and don't move, the clock keeps running, and it runs at a punishing rate. It's a closed loop. The company that sells the cars also runs the chargers, so the chargers never have to survive on their own. When a driver is choosing between cars, the network is a reason to buy. When the network needs to justify itself, it doesn't, because the car already did. Now watch what that says about the economics. In 2024, Tesla cut most of its supercharger team. The one company that made charging work, even it treated the chargers as expendable overhead, because at the end of the day, the station is a cost center that makes something else more valuable. That's the only version of this business that has ever reliably worked, and it only works because it's not actually a charging business. So here's the honest answer to the title question. An EV charging network struggles to make money because the entire business is structured backwards. Costs are continuous. The grid connection, the demand charge, the machines, the maintenance, the software, the rent. Those bills arrive every month whether a single car shows up or not. Revenue is episodic. It only arrives in the 20-minute chunks when somebody actually plugs in. And the rate at which cars show up, the utilization, is the one number that decides everything. Below the threshold, every station loses money. Above it, the same station prints it. The industry is not a machine that makes money. It's a bet that the traffic will arrive before the bills do. And both outcomes are real, happening right now in the same country. A fast charger on a busy interstate corridor, near a popular rest stop, can hit utilization high enough to make real money. The queue is real, the machines are busy, and the bill on the desk finally looks small next to what the station brings in. A charger in a suburban lot that was built because a grant was available sits empty most of the day and bleeds. The yellow tape goes up, stays up, and the bill doesn't shrink. Same machine, same markup, same grid, different traffic. The charger is not the business. The traffic is the business. And the people who built the boom didn't have the traffic yet. They had a court order and a government check. Now let's answer the question you're actually asking. Can you own a charging network and make money? It depends entirely on which traffic you're betting on. If you own the cars, like Tesla does, the chargers are a feature that sells the product. If you're a standalone operator, you need a location where utilization is high enough to flip the fixed costs. A highway corridor, a dense city where people can't charge at home, a site where the cars already are. That's the narrow slice where the math works, and it's much narrower than the boom suggests. Add to that a second product, the coffee stand, the shop, the advertising screen, because the margin is too thin to survive on the electricity alone. The stations that make it will be the ones that stop trying to be toll booths and start trying to be destinations. And even then, you're not really running a charging business. You're running a real estate business, a grid business, and a customer business, and the charger is just the door that lets people in. Keep this in mind the next time you see a headline about the charging boom. The thing that looks like a toll booth is not a toll booth. It's a claim on traffic that hasn't arrived yet. When you buy a charging network, or when a court, or a government, or an automaker builds one, you're not really buying chargers. You're buying a bet that the cars will come, that they'll come to your location, and that they'll come fast enough to cover the bills that never stop arriving. The machine on the pad is not the business. The grid connection behind it is the business. The cars that pull in are the business. And the one company that made it all work understood that from the beginning. It didn't build chargers to sell electricity. It built chargers to sell cars, and let the cars carry the cost. So if you ever do decide to buy a charging network, understand what you're actually buying. Not a toll booth, not a vending machine, not a license to print money. A 24-hour cost machine waiting on a customer who isn't there yet, priced as if he already was. In the right spot, with the right traffic, that machine turns into a real business, the bill shrinks, and the yellow tape stays off. In the wrong spot, it's a very expensive parking space with a bill you can't stop, and a machine nobody fixes. And the difference between those two outcomes isn't the charger at all. It's the cars that show up.